Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched the aliens decide humanity's fate. The observation deck of Nexus Prime stretched out before him like a giant theater, but instead of actors on stage, 12 different alien species argued about whether humans deserved respect. The station itself was massive, bigger than any city on Earth, floating in space around a distant world that served as neutral ground for the galaxy's most powerful beings. For 15 years, Earth had been what they called a probationary member of the Galactic Council. Humans could work for the aliens, fight their wars, and mine their planets, but they could not vote on important decisions or have any real say in how the galaxy was run. Morrison had come here today, hoping that would finally change. He had brought files full of everything humans had accomplished, every life they had saved, every problem they had solved. He thought it would be enough. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood up first. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, catching the light and throwing rainbows across the chamber walls. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The humans work hard. We cannot deny this, he said, but hard work is not the same as wisdom. They let their emotions control them. They make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. This makes them useful as workers and soldiers, but dangerous as leaders. Several other aliens nodded their agreement. The Kerrigan representative looked like a giant metal spider with too many eyes. When it spoke, the sound was like grinding gears. Humans are good at following orders. They do what we tell them to do. They fix our machines and fight our enemies. Why should we complicate this arrangement? They serve their purpose as they are. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but kept his face calm. Beside him, Dr. Lisa Carter leaned forward in her seat. She had spent years studying alien biology and had saved entire colonies from deadly diseases. Her work had earned respect from individual aliens, but apparently not from their governments. She wrote something on a small pad and showed it to Morrison. It read, "They talk about us like we're pets." The Altarian delegate spoke next. Altarians looked almost human, except for their blue skin and silver eyes. "We have observed the humans for many years," she said in a voice that sounded bored. "They are adequate. They perform basic tasks well enough, but they lack the sophistication needed for complex galactic politics. Their culture is too young, their understanding too limited." One by one, each species gave their opinion of humanity. The vegans called humans useful but primitive. The Centaurians said humans were good with their hands, but weak with their minds. The pattern was always the same. Humans could work, humans could fight, humans could die for the greater good. But humans could not lead or decide or dream of anything better. Morrison had requested permission to speak, and finally, the Chancellor gestured for him to approach the central platform. Morrison walked down the long ramp, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. When he reached the speaking circle, he looked up at the 12 towering alien representatives and began. "You say we are emotional," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. "You are right. When the plague struck the Centauri colonies 3 years ago, our emotions drove us to work day and night to find a cure. Dr. Carter here worked for 72 hours straight because she could not bear to watch children die. That emotion, that feeling you call weakness, saved 2 million lives." He pulled out a data pad and gestured to the massive screen behind him. Images appeared showing human engineers working in the burning wreckage of failed terraforming equipment. "You say we are primitive. These primitive humans restored 3 dead worlds that your advanced technology had given up on. They did not use fancy machines or computer calculations. They used instinct and creativity and the willingness to crawl into places where others feared to go. The images changed to show human soldiers in battle, fighting desperately against raiders who had been terrorizing the outer colonies. You say we are good at following orders. But when the Kerrigan mining stations were attacked last year, our soldiers did not wait for orders. They saw people in danger, and they acted. 47 humans died protecting Kerrigan civilians. They died not because they were ordered to, but because they believed it was right. Morrison looked directly at each alien representative as he continued. For 15 years, we have given you our best. Our scientists have made your research better. Our engineers have solved problems your computers could not handle. Our soldiers have died defending worlds that are not even our own. We have asked for only one thing in return: to be treated as equals, to have a voice in the decisions that affect all of us. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Chancellor spoke again, his crystal face showing no expression Morrison could read. The human presents his case well, he said, but emotion and passion are not substitutes for wisdom and maturity. The Council recognizes humanity's single quotes S. contributions, but membership in this body requires more than useful skills. It requires the judgment to make decisions that affect trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Humans have not demonstrated this level of responsibility. The vote was called. One by one, each species cast their decision. Morrison watched the display board as the results appeared. Zephyrian, no. Kerrigan, no. Altarian, no. The pattern continued without a single break. When the final vote was recorded, the result was unanimous. Humanity would remain in probationary status for another 10 years. Morrison gathered his materials and walked back up the ramp to where Carter was waiting. Her face was pale with anger, but she kept her voice low. 15 years, she whispered. 15 years of proving ourselves over and over, and they still see us as nothing more than useful animals. As they made their way through the station's corridors toward their shuttle, Morrison was quiet. Other humans working on the station looked at them with hopeful faces, but Morrison just shook his head slightly. Word would spread quickly. By the time they reached Earth, everyone would know that humanity had been rejected again. Carter stopped walking and turned to face Morrison. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Do we just accept this? Do we keep begging for their approval while they treat you as like servants?" Morrison looked out through a massive window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were human colonies working to make alien worlds livable. Human ships were carrying alien cargo through dangerous space routes. Human soldiers were standing guard over alien settlements. All of it done in the hope that someday, somehow, humanity would earn its place as an equal member of galactic civilization. "Maybe," Morrison said slowly, "it's time we stopped trying so hard to prove our worth to them." He turned to look at Carter, and she saw something new in his eyes. Not anger, but something colder and more dangerous. "Maybe it's time we let them see what the galaxy looks like without us." Carter stared at him for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "You mean ... "I mean," Morrison said, "they want to treat us like hired help instead of partners. So let's start acting like hired help. Let's do exactly what our contracts say. Nothing more and nothing less. Let's see how long their sophisticated civilization lasts when humans stop going above and beyond." They walked the rest of the way to their shuttle in silence, but both were thinking the same thing. The Galactic Council had made their choice. Now it was time for humanity to make theirs. Captain Ryan Hayes looked at the contract renewal form on his desk and set it aside without signing. The Altarian Trade Consortium had offered him the same deal as always: transport their goods across dangerous space routes for standard pay, while taking all the risks himself. For 5 years, he had signed these contracts without question because he believed he was building something bigger, helping humanity earn its place in the galaxy. Now he knew better. Hayes commanded the cargo. Ship New Horizon, and his crew had always been proud of their reputation. When Altarian merchants needed supplies delivered to remote colonies, they called Hayes because his team found ways to get through blockades and storms that stopped other ships. When time was critical and lives depended on fast delivery, Hayes pushed his engines beyond safe limits to make impossible deadlines. The Altarians paid him for standard shipping, but they got premium service because Hayes and his crew believed they were proving human value. That was before Morrison's report reached every human in the galaxy. A message was simple and spread through informal channels. The Galactic Council saw humans as useful animals, nothing more. They would never be equals, never be partners, never be anything but convenient labor. The report included Morrison's recommendation: fulfill contracts exactly as written, but stop volunteering extra effort that would never be appreciated or rewarded. Hayes picked up his communicator and sent the same message to 47 other human cargo captains. Contract expires next month. Not renewing. Time to find work with people who respect what we do. The responses came back quickly. Every captain agreed. They had all been thinking the same thing. On the industrial world of Procyon 4, shift supervisor, Maria Santos noticed the change in her workers before anyone else did. The humans still arrived on time and completed all required tasks, but something was different. When overtime was offered, they politely declined. When equipment broke down outside normal working hours, they filed proper maintenance requests instead of fixing problems themselves. When production targets seemed unreachable, they worked steadily toward the official goals without pushing for the extra effort that usually made quotas. Successful Santos had managed human work crews for 8 years and had grown used to their habit of exceeding expectations. Human engineers typically arrived early to check equipment before shifts began. They stayed late to finish important projects. They suggested improvements that saved time and money. They solved problems that were not technically their responsibility. Because they saw the bigger picture of keeping operations running smoothly. Now, they did exactly what their job description specified, nothing more and nothing less. When Santos asked why productivity was declining, her human workers looked confused. "We are meeting all contractual obligations," they said. "If current performance is unsatisfactory, perhaps the contracts need revision." At the Zephyrian Medical Institute, Dr. Ben Parker submitted his resignation letter and cleaned out his laboratory. His research on cellular regeneration was the most advanced project in the facility, with potential applications that could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. Parker had worked on it for 3 years, often staying through weekends and holidays because the breakthrough seemed so close. The Zephyrian administrators were shocked when Parker announced he was leaving. "But the research is not complete," they protested. "You cannot abandon such important work." Parker smiled politely and handed them a thick folder. "All my official findings are documented according to standard research protocols," he said. "Any qualified scientist can continue from this point." What he did not mention was that the real insights, the creative leaps and intuitive connections that made the research possible, existed only in his mind. The documented procedures were technically correct, but missed the deeper understanding that drove real discovery. Similar scenes played out across dozens of research facilities. Human scientists finished their current contracts and departed, leaving behind neat files and empty laboratories. Their alien colleagues found themselves with extensive data, but no clear direction for moving forward. The most significant change occurred in the military sector. Colonel Amy Johnson commanded the 2nd Human Defense Battalion, stationed on Vega 7, protecting mining operations from frequent raider attacks. For years, Johnson's forces had been the most effective unit in the sector, not because they had better equipment or more training, but because they anticipated problems and adapted quickly to changing situations. When Kerrigan raiders attacked a mining station, Johnson's forces responded exactly as their orders specified. They established a defensive perimeter around the installation, engaged hostile forces within their assigned area, and waited for Galactic Council reinforcements to arrive. They did not pursue fleeing raiders into the asteroid field as they had done dozens of times before. They did not volunteer their ships for extended patrol missions. They did not coordinate with other units to set up ambushes along likely escape routes. The raiders completed their attack, stole what they came for, and escaped through corridors that Johnson's forces could have easily blocked. When questioned about the tactical decisions, Johnson replied that her orders had been to defend the mining station, not to pursue enemy forces or coordinate sector-wide operations. She had followed orders precisely. Commander Veltar of the Kerrigan fleet attended the post-battle briefing and noticed something troubling. The human forces fought competently, he reported to his superiors, but they lacked their usual initiative. They seemed mechanical. They performed exactly as programmed, but showed no creativity or adaptation. The pattern spread quickly through all human military units. They responded to emergencies within specified timeframes. They engaged enemies according to established protocols. They completed all assigned missions successfully. But they stopped anticipating threats, stopped adapting tactics to unique situations, stopped taking risks that might save lives or prevent future attacks. The changes were subtle at first, easily dismissed as temporary fluctuations in performance. Alien supervisors noticed decreased efficiency, but attributed it to normal variations in worker motivation. Military commanders observed reduced tactical flexibility, but assumed it was due to recent personnel changes or equipment issues. Only a few perceptive individuals recognized what was really happening. Dr. Zixenden, a vegan scientist who had worked closely with human researchers for years, noted that her human colleagues had become strangely formal and procedural. They still contributed to projects, but their suggestions were conventional, and their insights predictable. Chancellor Krythan of the Zephyrian Council received reports of minor efficiency decreases in human-operated facilities, but was not concerned. Perhaps the humans are finally learning their proper place, he remarked to his advisors. They are becoming less presumptuous and more professional. What the aliens failed to understand was that humans had always been professional. The extra effort, the creative solutions, the willingness to go beyond requirements had never been about following orders. It had been about partnership, about building something together, about proving that different species could work as equals. Toward common goals. Now that partnership was revealed as an illusion. Humans were employees, not colleagues. They were tools, not teammates. And tools perform exactly the function for which they are designed, nothing more. On Earth, Morrison met with President Helen Torres and the Global Defense Council to discuss the early results of what they privately called the withdrawal protocol. Phase 1 is proceeding as planned, Morrison reported. Human productivity remains within acceptable ranges, but alien dependence on our initiative is becoming apparent. They still do not understand what is happening. President Torres nodded grimly. How long before they realize the scope of the problem? Conservative estimate is 18 months, Morrison replied. They built their entire system, assuming humans would always exceed expectations. When we limit ourselves to meeting expectations exactly, their efficiency calculations fall apart. But they are too proud to admit they need us, so they will try to solve problems internally before asking for help. The seeds of change had been planted across the galaxy. Human workers were fulfilling every contractual obligation, while providing none of the extra value that had made alien civilizations dependent on them. It would take time for the full impact to become clear, but the process was irreversible. Humanity had spent 15 years trying to prove they deserved respect. Now they would let the galaxy discover what respect was worth. 18 months after the Council vote, the first cracks in galactic civilization became impossible to ignore. What had started as minor efficiency decreases was now a cascade of failures affecting every major alien society. The beings who had dismissed humanity as useful but limited were learning that their entire way of life depended on capabilities they had never bothered to understand. The Altarian Trade Consortium faced the most immediate crisis. Their shipping network, which connected hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems, was collapsing under the weight of accumulated delays. Trade Administrator Kex Thule stared at the cargo scheduling displays in growing panic as delivery. Time stretched from days to weeks to months. The problem was not that human captains were refusing to work. Captain Hayes and the other human cargo pilots were still fulfilling their contracts, but only their contracts. When a shipment of medical supplies needed to reach a plague-stricken colony ahead of schedule, Hayes delivered it exactly when his contract specified, not a day earlier. When asteroid storms threatened shipping lanes, human pilots navigated the safe routes marked in their flight plans, instead of finding creative alternatives that could save days of travel time. The Altarians had built their economy around just-in-time delivery systems that assumed someone would always find ways to overcome unexpected obstacles. Human captains had always been that someone, using their judgment and experience to adapt to changing conditions. Now they followed standard procedures regardless of circumstances, and the intricate web of galactic commerce began to unravel. On the research front, the situation was even more desperate. Dr. Kethmer, the brilliant Zephyrian scientist assigned to continue Ben Parker's cellular regeneration project, found himself drowning in data he could not interpret. Parker's documented procedures were technically perfect, but they revealed nothing about the intuitive leaps that had driven the research forward. Kethmer spent months repeating Parker's experiments, achieving the same results without understanding why they mattered. The data showed cellular activity that seemed promising, but the path from observation to application remained hidden. It is as if he left us a map with all the destinations marked, but no roads between them, Kethmer complained to his colleagues. Similar problems plagued research facilities across the galaxy. Human scientists had always collaborated in ways that went beyond formal documentation. They shared insights during casual conversations, built on each other's half-formed ideas, and made creative connections that rigid academic protocols could not capture. Their alien replacements had access to all the official data, but none of the underlying understanding that made it meaningful. The military consequences were the most immediately dangerous. Kerrigan raiders, emboldened by the predictable responses of human forces, began launching attacks deeper into Council territory. What had once been minor raids on isolated outposts became systematic campaigns against major installations. Captain Steve Miller of the human vessel Terra Nova exemplified the new military reality. When raiders attacked a vegan research station, Miller's forces arrived precisely on schedule and deployed according to standard defensive protocols. They established a perimeter, engaged hostile forces within their assigned area, and maintained position until relieved by Council reinforcements. The raiders used the time to steal critical research data and escape through an unmonitored corridor that Miller's forces could have easily secured. Miller's tactical decisions were flawless according to regulations, but the enemy had adapted to fight against regulations rather than against creative opponents. Vegan Station Administrator Talandra filed a complaint that captured the growing frustration of alien commanders everywhere. The human forces fought like automatons, she reported. Every movement was precise, every decision was by protocol, but they showed no intuition or flexibility. The raiders knew exactly what to expect and planned accordingly. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Human medical staff treated patients competently, but offered no breakthrough insights. Human engineers solved the specific problems in their work orders, but ignored related issues that would cause future failures. Human miners extracted resources efficiently, but suggested number improvements to increase productivity or reduce costs. What the aliens were discovering was that they had never truly understood what made their civilization function. They had assumed that success came from advanced technology and superior intelligence, but the reality was far more complex. Their machines were sophisticated, but humans had been the ones who knew when to override automated systems. Their procedures were detailed, but humans had been the ones who knew when circumstances required flexibility. Chancellor Krython received increasingly urgent reports from across the Zephyrian territories. Mining operations that had run smoothly for decades were experiencing mysterious equipment failures. Colonial administrators reported supply shortages and communication breakdowns. Military commanders complained of tactical difficulties that seemed to have no clear cause. The Chancellor summoned Morrison for an emergency meeting aboard Nexus Prime. The human ambassador arrived punctually and sat calmly as Krython described the growing problems affecting galactic civilization. Your people have become different, the Chancellor said, his crystal features reflecting his confusion. They complete their assigned tasks, but they no longer contribute the additional insights we have grown to expect. Productivity is declining across all sectors where humans are employed. Morrison listened politely and consulted his datapad before responding. Human workers are fulfilling all contractual obligations exactly as specified, he said. Performance. Metrics show compliance rates above 95% in all categories. If current results are unsatisfactory, perhaps the contract specifications need revision. The Chancellor's crystal face shifted colors in what Morrison had learned was a sign of frustration. This is not about contract compliance, Krython said. This is about the collaborative relationship we have built over 15 years. Humans used to anticipate our needs and provide solutions before problems arose. Now they wait for specific instructions and do only what is explicitly required. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The Galactic Council made its position clear regarding humanity's role in galactic affairs, he said. We are probationary members suitable for basic tasks, but not qualified for leadership or decision-making. We have adjusted our behavior to match the Council's assessment of our capabilities. The meeting continued for hours, with the Chancellor growing increasingly agitated as Morrison calmly deflected every complaint with references to contracts and capabilities. What Krython could not understand was the humans had never been employees. In the way other species understood employment, they had been partners who happened to work for wages, contributing creativity and initiative because they believed they were building something together. Now they knew they were not partners, but tools, and tools do not think beyond their intended function. A hammer does not suggest better ways to build a house. A computer does not question the wisdom of its programming. And human workers, classified as useful but limited, no longer offered insights that exceeded their designated limitations. Aliens had created their own crisis by defining humanity's role too narrowly. They wanted the benefits of human creativity without acknowledging human intelligence. They demanded human loyalty without offering human dignity. They expected human partnership while refusing human equality. Across the galaxy, the accumulated weight of these contradictions was bringing down the civilization that had seemed so advanced and stable. The Galactic Council had dismissed humanity as emotional and primitive, but their own success had depended on exactly those qualities they claimed to despise. As Morrison prepared to leave Nexus Prime, he knew the next phase of humanity's withdrawal was about to begin. The aliens were starting to understand that something was wrong, but they still believed a problem could be solved by adjusting procedures or improving management. They had not yet grasped the fundamental truth that would reshape the galaxy. Human value had never been in following orders. It had been in improving on them. 2 years after the council vote, The galaxy was learning that dismissing humanity had consequences no one had imagined. What had begun as minor inefficiencies had grown into catastrophic system failures that threatened the foundation of interstellar civilization. The sophisticated alien societies that had viewed humans as useful primitives were discovering that their entire way of life had depended on those supposedly limited capabilities. The Altarian star system faced mass starvation as their food distribution network collapsed completely. Trade Administrator Kex Thol watched helplessly as cargo ships delivered spoiled provisions to colony after colony. The human crews were following standard preservation protocols exactly, maintaining environmental controls within specified parameters regardless of what they were carrying. Previously, human cargo handlers had used their experience to make constant adjustments during transport. They knew that Centauri grain needed higher humidity than regulations specified, that vegan protein compounds broke down if temperature fluctuated more than 2 degrees, that certain fruits from Earth's colonies required specific atmospheric mixtures that were not mentioned in any manual. This knowledge had never been formally documented because it came from years of practical experience and intuitive understanding. Now that expertise was gone. Human crews maintained standard environmental settings while thousands of tons of food rotted in their cargo holds. When questioned, they pointed to their contracts and regulations. They were doing exactly what they had been hired to do, following exactly the procedures they had been given. If the results were unsatisfactory, that was a problem with the procedures, not their performance. The Altarian government declared a state of emergency and began rationing food across their entire star system. Riots broke out on 3 worlds as colonists faced hunger for the first time in generations. The sophisticated civilization that had dismissed humans as adequate for basic tasks was learning that keeping people fed was more complex than their basic understanding had recognized. The Kerrigan territories suffered an even worse fate. The plague that had begun as a localized outbreak spread unchecked across their colonies, killing millions while Kerrigan medical science proved helpless to stop it. Their physicians were technically competent and their equipment was advanced, but they lacked the creative problem-solving that had made human researchers so valuable. Dr. Carter had once spent 72 hours straight working to understand a similar plague, combining insights from human medicine with alien biology to find connections that neither species could have discovered alone. The current Kerrigan medical staff followed established treatment protocols and waited for symptoms to match known disease patterns. When the plague mutated in unexpected ways, they had no framework for adaptation. The human medical personnel, still working in Kerrigan space, treated patients competently within their job descriptions. They administered prescribed medications, monitored vital signs, and filed accurate reports. But they no longer stayed late to research unusual symptoms, no longer suggested experimental treatments, no longer collaborated with alien doctors to develop new approaches. Their contracts specified patient care, not medical research. So medical research was not their responsibility. As the death toll mounted, Kerrigan officials pleaded with human medical staff to provide additional assistance. The humans politely declined, explaining that such work would exceed their contractual obligations and that they were not qualified for the complex medical research that Kerrigan leaders had previously described as beyond human capabilities. Military situation became completely untenable. Fleet Admiral Texfer of the Galactic Defense Force submitted a report that sent shockwaves through the council chambers. Enemy forces had adapted their tactics to exploit the predictable responses of human units, turning the galaxy's most effective military forces into liability. Human forces perform adequately in routine scenarios, the Admiral reported, but they have become tactically sterile and strategically predictable. They execute standard maneuvers flawlessly, but show no capacity for innovation or adaptation. Enemy commanders now plan their attacks based on the assumption that humans will respond exactly according to regulation. And this assumption has proven correct in every engagement. The report detailed battle after battle, where human forces had followed orders perfectly while achieving strategically meaningless victories. They secured assigned objectives, while enemies escaped to fight again. They maintained defensive positions, while raiders struck undefended targets nearby. They won tactical engagements while losing strategic campaigns. Captain Miller's Terra Nova had become typical of human military performance. When pirates attacked a supply convoy, Miller's forces arrived on schedule and engaged the enemy within their assigned parameters. They drove off the immediate threat and secured the convoy, but they did not pursue the pirates or investigate their base of operations. Miller's orders had been to protect the convoy, not to eliminate piracy in the sector, so eliminating piracy was not his concern. The pirates regrouped and attacked again 2 days later, knowing exactly what to expect from the human response. The pattern repeated across the galaxy as enemy forces learned to plan around human predictability instead of human creativity. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian mining empire that funded much of the galactic infrastructure was crumbling as their operations became unprofitable without human innovation. Automated extraction systems, designed for ideal conditions, failed repeatedly when faced with the harsh realities of alien environments. The Zephyrians had always assumed that mining was a simple matter of following procedures and operating machinery. Human miners had quietly compensated for this assumption by modifying techniques for unusual geology, anticipating equipment failures before they occurred, and finding creative solutions when standard methods proved inadequate. Now the full complexity of interstellar mining became apparent. Extraction equipment broke down regularly because human maintenance workers no longer performed preventive repairs beyond their scheduled duties. Production quotas went unmet because human operators no longer adjusted procedures for variations in mineral composition. Entire mining colonies faced closure as costs exceeded profits for the first time in decades. The crisis reached its peak when the Council faced a choice between acknowledging their mistake and doubling down on their position. Pride and institutional arrogance won the internal debate. Chancellor Krythan appeared before the full Council assembly to deliver what would later be remembered as the most expensive speech in galactic history. Recent performance declines in human-operated facilities confirm our original assessment, the Chancellor announced. Humans lack the capability for sustained excellence in complex operations. Their initial competence was apparently superficial, masking fundamental limitations that have now become apparent under extended observation. The pronouncement sent shockwaves through human communities across the galaxy. After 2 years of watching alien civilizations struggle without human creativity and initiative, they had expected some recognition of their true value. Instead, they received blame for the failures that their withdrawal had revealed. The Chancellor continued his speech with recommendations that sealed the galaxy's fate. "We must reduce our dependence on human capabilities immediately," he declared. "Automated systems and alien personnel should replace human workers in all critical functions. The humans have revealed their true nature, and we must adapt accordingly." The announcement triggered humanity's final response. President Torres appeared in a galactic broadcast that reached every inhabited world. Her message was brief but devastating in its implications for alien civilization. "The Galactic Council has made its position unmistakably clear," Torres said. "Humanity's contributions are unsatisfactory, and our capabilities are inadequate for the complex challenges of galactic civilization. We accept this assessment and will act accordingly." The President paused to let her words sink in before delivering the statement that would change everything. "Effective immediately, Earth recalls all human citizens from Council space. We will honor existing contracts until their expiration dates, but no agreements will be renewed. Humanity withdraws from voluntary cooperation with species that consider our participation inadequate. The exodus began within hours of the broadcast. Human starship captains completed their current cargo runs and filed flight plans for Earth. Human researchers finished their contracted projects and submitted final reports before departing. Human medical staff treated their remaining patients and transferred care to alien colleagues. The withdrawal was orderly and professional, exactly what the galaxy had come to expect from human reliability. But the scale was unprecedented. Thousands of ships, millions of workers. Entire research teams and military units began the journey home to Earth, and human-controlled SpaceDOT as the first wave of departing humans reached their ships. Alien supervisors across the galaxy began to understand what they had lost. Not just workers, but the workers who made everything else work. Not just employees, but the people who had held their civilization together through intelligence and initiative they had never bothered to acknowledge. 1 year after humanity's exodus, the galaxy had learned the true price of arrogance. The sophisticated civilizations that had dismissed humans as useful but limited were discovering that their entire way of life had been an illusion built on capabilities they had never understood or appreciated. The empty ships, silent laboratories, and failing infrastructure told the story of a society that had mistaken its workers for its foundation. The Altarian Trade Consortium no longer existed as a functioning organization. Trade Administrator Kexthal sat in his empty office aboard a station that had once coordinated commerce across hundreds of worlds. The shipping network that had connected galactic civilization had collapsed completely when automated systems proved incapable of handling the countless variables of interstellar transport. Cargo ships still moved between worlds, but their deliveries were erratic and often useless. Automated environmental controls could not adapt to unexpected situations, so fresh food spoiled while preserved goods arrived damaged. Navigation computers followed predetermined routes even when asteroid storms or stellar phenomena made alternate paths necessary, resulting in delays that turned days into months. The Altarians had designed their economy around assumptions that someone would always find ways to make impossible schedules work, that someone would always adapt to changing circumstances, that someone would always solve problems that automated systems could not handle. They had never realized that someone was always human. Now their colonies faced permanent shortages of basic necessities. 3 worlds had already been abandoned as their populations evacuated to systems with more reliable supply lines. The Altarian government, which had once controlled trade across a dozen star systems, was reduced to managing the orderly retreat of their civilization. The Zephyrian mining empire suffered an even more complete collapse. Chancellor Krython toured the abandoned facilities that had once extracted the raw materials for galactic civilization. Massive automated extractors sat broken and silent, their sophisticated programming useless against the realities of alien geology. The Zephyrians had believed that mining was simply a matter of pointing machines at mineral deposits and collecting the results. Human miners had quietly managed the countless complications that made this simple vision possible. They had modified extraction techniques for unusual rock formations, performed predictive maintenance that prevented costly breakdowns, and adapted to changing conditions that no computer program could anticipate. Without human flexibility and problem-solving, the mining operations proved unsustainable. Equipment failures cascaded through the system as automated maintenance proved inadequate for the harsh conditions of alien worlds. Production costs soared while yields declined, making the operations economically impossible to continue. The Chancellor's own economic advisors estimated complete financial collapse within 6 months. The empire that had funded galactic infrastructure was bankrupt, its treasury depleted by failed attempts to replace human capabilities with technology that could not match human adaptability. The medical crisis in Kerrigan space had become a humanitarian catastrophe. The plague that human researchers could have controlled continued spreading across their colonies, killing millions while Kerrigan medical science proved helpless to stop it. The death toll had reached catastrophic proportions, with entire planetary populations facing extinction. Dr. Carter, now working exclusively for Earth's medical research facilities, monitored the situation with professional sadness. She could have developed a treatment within weeks if she had access to Kerrigan biological samples and research facilities. Her successors had all the same equipment and data, but they lacked the creative insights needed to connect human medical knowledge with alien biology. The Kerrigan government had sent desperate requests for human medical assistance, offering enormous sums for temporary consultation contracts. Earth's response had been polite but firm. Human medical capabilities were apparently inadequate for complex challenges, according to the Galactic Council's official assessment. If Kerrigan leaders believed this assessment was incorrect, they were welcome to request a formal revision through proper diplomatic channels. The military situation had become completely hopeless. Commander Veltar, now leading what remained of the Galactic Defense Force, submitted reports that painted a picture of systematic collapse across all defended sectors. Raider attacks had increased dramatically as enemy forces learned to exploit the predictable responses of automated defense systems and rigid alien military doctrine. We prepared for humans to be unreliable allies, Veltar reported to the emergency council session. We never prepared for them to be absent entirely. Our tactical systems assumed human adaptation and creativity would compensate for program limitations. Without that compensation, our defenses have become transparent to any intelligent enemy. 3 major colonies had fallen to raiders who simply avoided areas where automated defenses were strongest and attacked where inflexible defenders could not adapt quickly enough. The sophisticated military technology that had once protected galactic civilization proved useless when enemy forces knew exactly how it would respond to any given situation. The raiders were not even particularly clever or well-equipped. They had simply learned to fight against predictable systems instead of adaptive opponents. Where human commanders had once anticipated enemy movements and prepared counter-strategies, automated systems followed predetermined protocols that enemy forces could study and exploit. Fleet engagements that had once ended in decisive victories for galactic forces now resulted in tactical stalemates and strategic defeats. Alien commanders found themselves winning individual battles while losing entire campaigns as enemies adapted faster than their rigid command structures could respond. The contrast with human space was stark and impossible to ignore. Captain Hayes, now commanding the exploration vessel Independence under Earth's expanding colonial program, had discovered 3 habitable worlds in the past 6 months. Human ships explored new star systems while their former employers struggled to maintain control over territories they had held for generations. Human colonies thrived without alien oversight or interference, free from obligations to species that had viewed them as inferior. Humanity expanded rapidly into unexplored regions of the galaxy. Their ships found resources, their scientists made breakthroughs, their engineers solved problems that had challenged galactic civilization for centuries. The technology that humans developed independently was not necessarily more advanced than alien science, but it was more practical and adaptable. Human ships were designed to be repaired with available materials rather than specialized components. Human settlements were planned to grow and change rather than maintain static configurations. Human research focused on solving real problems rather than pursuing abstract theoretical perfection. On Earth, President Torres met with their expanded cabinet to discuss humanity's growing success and the galaxy's continuing decline. Our colonial expansion is ahead of all projections, reported Colonial Secretary Morrison, who had returned from his diplomatic duties to oversee humanity's future rather than negotiate its past. 15 new worlds have been settled in the past year, Morrison continued. Our population is growing rapidly. Our economy is stronger than ever, and our research facilities are making discoveries that we're keeping strictly to ourselves. The galaxy that dismissed us as primitive is learning what primitives can accomplish when they're not held back by alien expectations. Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the crisis that was destroying their civilization. The magnificent station showed visible signs of decay as maintenance standards declined, without human engineers to solve complex technical problems. Half the original 12 species now faced economic collapse, social unrest, or military defeat. Chancellor Kryphen, his crystal features dulled by stress and exhaustion, addressed the nearly empty chamber. Several species had already withdrawn from the council to focus on their own survival, leaving gaps in the assembly that highlighted how much had been lost. "We have learned a painful truth," the Chancellor began, his voice lacking the confident authority that had once dismissed human potential. "We believed ourselves to be the architects of galactic civilization, but we were merely its beneficiaries. We dismissed the humans as simple laborers and unsophisticated allies, failing to recognize that their strength was not in following our orders, but in exceeding them. The admission came too late to save the civilizations that had rejected humanity, but it marked the first time any alien leader had acknowledged the scope of their mistake." The Chancellor continued his speech with words that would be remembered as the epitaph for the old galactic order. "We treated them as servants when they were, in fact, the foundation upon which our entire way of life rested. We valued their compliance while dismissing their innovation. We demanded their loyalty while refusing their equality. In our arrogance, we destroyed the partnership that made our civilization possible." The final irony came when the Council formally requested renewed cooperation with humanity.